Ben, what I want to ask you really is about how you see innovative technologies helping these large financial institutions and solving the challenges. Because you would have worked with several banks and several large firms, and you would have seen how different budgets deal with it in different departments and different resource allocations happen. And so what is your view on how technologies like AI and NLP are solving some of these challenges?
Yes, indeed. So, yeah, thanks, Debbie. Hello, everyone. And I hope everyone is enjoying the caricatures of the four of us on the screen as much as we have. And I'm sure it's given everyone a good chuckle on this call. So, yeah, I think following on from Matthew's points that were being made around, both the way that you can marry the demands of the organisation from both the technology aspects, but also, considering the needs of compliance and through to, how we think about data governance. I think, coming on from that and then looking at the opportunities that we have today with the world of cloud computing and, being able to leverage now a whole different capability of understanding data and working with large data sets does present some very real opportunities, and I think very well akin to the challenge around information governance and managing compliance across records and data across the globe, across a large financial institution. And, if we just take a step back to kind of set the scene on that, if you think about the changes that we've talked about, the regulatory changes since the financial crisis, 10 years ago, exponential increase in regulation and an exponential increase in the regularity of the change of regulation. And then you couple that with the fact that costs have gone significantly, north in terms of cost of compliance. Somewhere now, 15 to 20% of operating costs can be found within the firm's overhead on maintaining compliance. And with that, we're pushing now nearly 400 billion of fines since the crisis. And so the point being is that technology has to be a solution to this. Technology has to be a way forward to better deal with this. And even though, today we have lots of new compute capabilities with cloud computing, the key thing now is really about how can we take the data and learn from the data and be able to help automate manual processes, manual tasks, and reduce the significant complexities that come with understanding the regulatory data and how it relates to the organisation's information assets. And so everyone would have heard a lot about RegTech and about artificial intelligence, but really, in simple terms, that's about leveraging the big data opportunities that we have, cloud computing, applying machine learning and natural language processing and other tools and techniques that help us really, really understand what the regulatory data is and what the considerations are and what that looks like on a global scale, and then being able to understand how that aligns to the customer or the organizational information and the records and data that's held across the organization. And so, specific use cases that we see in that is we see the ability to be able to use AI and use these capabilities to go and look at the regulatory data that's generally found across all of the sources, the regulatory sources across the world in terms of websites and various documents and publications, and being able to take that and work out very quickly what's relevant to records and data keeping, and in that being able to reduce the complexity of trying to understand what of those regulations your organisation needs to consider and needs to act upon, and in that being able to simplify some of the conflicting requirements from regulatory requirements through to data privacy requirements, and being able to easily and quickly decipher what regulation, based upon that risk appetite that your organisation may have, needs to be considered. How does it apply to your organisation, and how specifically does it apply to the records and data that you manage? And I think if you try and do that manually today, it's an endless task and one which will rarely achieve a successful outcome, and the costs and time involved are simply prohibitive. Whereas using AI and using some of those technologies today enables you to do just that in a much more effective way, but also then enable you to automate processes using that new intelligence and the data that you've collected and the rules that you now understand, and being able to use technology to automate downstream processes off the back of that. So I think the opportunities are significant, but frankly, it's the only way that large organizations across the globe are really going to be able to maintain compliance with their records and data.
Brilliant. And Ben, we have a very specific question for you based on what you've just said.
Sure.
And the audience has asked what your view on data pooling is, creating a data lake to help collate the data to enable a generic compliance approach.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, first of all, you have to understand, you've got the external data and you've got the internal data. So you have to understand what your regulatory obligations are. That's big data. There's a huge array of regulation that needs to be considered. The cross-border complexities of deciphering that regulation are immensely challenging. And the only way you're going to solve that is by creating that data lake and being able to determine exactly what is relevant and what needs to be considered. And you need machines to read that data, not people. And, hence at Cube, that's exactly what we do for our customers today. And so in doing that, we have the ability to, with today's technologies, with the likes of machine learning, is to be able to identify patterns in that data that help us understand what those regulations and obligations are talking to, and therefore how we make that data relevant to our internal data. And whether that be the actual records and data attributes that sit within those records that we're maintaining, or whether that be to understand what records and regulations are applicable to the products we sell or the lines of business that we operate in. You have to really be able to start with the data to be able to determine that. So yeah, it's fundamental.